Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sal Greco, and you're watching and listening to the Sal Greco Show. Thanks for tuning in. If everybody can, before we start, if you can you please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. And if you can, go back and you can rewatch some of the older episodes, which will reference a lot of what you hear again today. You could do that by going to the Finest Unfiltered YouTube channel, then going to the video section. And also you could go, and if you can, also go to the Sal Greco Show YouTube, where you could also like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button there, where there's previous episodes and also segments and short videos in regards to all the episodes of the Sal Greco Show. So today we're going to be talking a lot about what else? New York City and the Eric Adams administration. And speaking of Eric Adams, I'm going to, full disclosure here, before we put this on the screen, you might think this is AI, which you would say, oh, maybe you guys are creating memes and AI videos. No, this is not AI. What you're seeing here is an article from Complex. Okay, I'm going to give a shout out to them because they actually reposted my video of Eric Adams at a town hall last night. And, folks, this is not AI. So let me show you what he did last night in Rockaway at a town hall.
There's a real history for me. I had a shorty that lived out here, used to come out taking that long A train ride, in the cold. Love is blind, and, taking that long A train. I did not have a car. And one or two times I didn't have a token. So yes, I did jump off with a turnstile. I'm not gonna, it's over. The statute of limitation is over.
Yeah, the statute of limitations is over. Look, this guy, just a few weeks ago or a week ago, he's calling people Negroes. He's doubling down, and now he's talking about shorties. I don't know if this guy is serious about running again and getting reelected. I don't know who he's trying to talk to or relate to. There were concerned citizens at a town hall, and he starts off by saying that exact line. That is not AI, folks. That is real. And, what else can I say? This guy is a human content machine. He puts out so much content. And I mean, here it is. Look, dozens of Adams donors shifting loyalty to Cuomo, Adrian Adams in the 2025 mayoral race. That's another article, I believe, today, written by Chris Sommerfeld of the Daily News. And look, I'm hearing from a lot of people in this political sphere, the donations, as I stated in the previous episode, I believe Cuomo got $1.5 million in donations, which equates to, I think he has about $8 or $9 million in the campaign coffers. The other guy, the socialist, he's got about the same. So that's a neck and neck run. And I think Eric can't even qualify for campaign matching funds. So that, when you're going around and you want to show up to town halls, which is something serious and his concerned citizens, you want to talk like that, I don't think you're going to have people that feel sympathetic. He's always going to have a portion of, New Yorkers that are on his side, but it won't be enough to carry him in an election. So the next segment here I was going to talk about is the incident that occurred yesterday, where there was an article about the transit district commander of the District 20, he is got transferred, I believe, for taking crimes and fudging numbers. And I gotta say this, because this is a two-part thing. The first part is this was almost like, people know about this. This is no secret. I believe if you've watched the Finest Unfiltered, and you've watched this show, and you've listened to John McCarry, Eric Dim, myself, Marlon Bethel, we've actually mentioned how, they fudge crime stats and they lower numbers. Eric Adams always touts that, crime is down and jobs are up. The city's not surviving. It's thriving, when it's anything but that, because the real crime numbers, as you can see on whitecollarfraud.com through Sam Antar, the numbers were always up. Violent crime has skyrocketed under Eric Adams in his administration. So this seems like they're picking on this guy in particular in Transit 20. Now, you can say what you want. And they're saying, well, he's downgraded crimes or he's upgraded crimes. And now they're going to say the lieutenant or the sergeant there, and they're saying they were in on this. This has been going on for decades in the New York City Police Department. And you could virtually pick on any precinct commander anywhere and say, I know you fudged this number, or so, you know, and what are you going to do? So what, you're going to transfer every single commander? And I feel that it's almost hypocritical to try to pick on this one captain who's now going to be in central booking, I believe. I mean, that's the place they exile you in New York City Police Department, and they're going to say, well, this guy fudged numbers, therefore we're gonna go after him. Nighthawk just comments, he just stated they scapegoated him. That's how I see this, and a lot of people are saying the same thing, especially on the job, but in the NYPD. But I did post something a while back in regards to transit that is a bigger problem, and that's Transit District 20. And this was a post that I had stated, and this was back a bit, believe about 2 months ago. And it says, according to NYPD sources, the majority of arrests made in New York City transit system by the NYPD is for, quote, numbers. The district attorney offices are declining all prosecutions of said arrests. This is perception management via controlling the narrative. And what really happened here, what's going on, and it started there in Transit District 20. There's a mental health crisis, and I understand that some of these people. Listen, I was a police officer. I understand when you approach them in transit, they go nuts. They swing at you. They may spit on you. You know, they're defecating out. They're doing crazy things. So those people, you could say, all right, we have to arrest them or ticket them or summons them, whatever it is, tab summons. But that's not what I'm talking about. What they're doing and what they have been doing, especially on the police commissioner now, Jessica Tisch, is they're arresting homeless people at an alarming rate. And if you stand outside Transit District 20 for the last 2 months, you're going to see a revolving door of homeless people coming in and out of there. So what they do is they've been arresting them, okay? And then they come out and, you know, there's no prosecution because some of these people, I don't know if they have warrants, they don't have a warrant, or that they're writing summonses for, you know, sitting on 2 seats because they're just sleeping there. And instead of trying to help them the way Eric Adams states he does, or he wanted to, they're just arresting them. And this seems to be now a practice that's now occurring citywide. So when they show you a graphic of we've arrested X amount of people, what they're not telling you is how many declined prosecutions they are. Now, I understand people are going to say, okay, because then the flip side of the coin is, oh, the district attorney is soft and the district attorney is a bad guy. And I you do make a point. But at the same time, there are rules and laws and regulations in transit. And I'm sure every transit personnel that's either retired or still on the job could tell you, not everything you arrest people for, especially a homeless person, because that's going to clog the system. You know, and then they changed all these rules. There's discovery laws, bail reform. So you have to be cognizant of this. But the people that are in charge of the police department, in particular, your chief of department, this person still thinks it's 1995 and we arrest our way out of a situation, as used to be said for years. But it's a different time now. And that is a recurring problem in transit. So if and overall now, so if you are going to be critical of the precinct commander, that was going on over there, and maybe he has some information that could tell people more of what was being ordered and what's being ordered. Because just arresting anyone and everyone while you're clogging the system, officers are sitting there. They don't want to arrest these people. They rather sit and wait to, it's called precision policing, which is something you need to actually probably retrain a whole job on. Broken windows, like I stated before, only works in the modern era if it's precision policing. But you'll have to train everybody all over again and tell them this isn't 1990s and we can't do it this way because there's new laws and all this stuff that could get you in trouble. And essentially, a police officer may end up with a huge CCRB list on his record because of actions like this. So I wonder if this commander has any information about the body for body scheme with all these decline prosecutions that have been going on. So the next thing, obviously, the main event tonight is about the citywide response team, the CRT unit. And right back, I believe, in Christmas, I had referenced this in a post myself about the beginnings of CRT. So this was a post from Christmas, and I said, I look forward to reading about how current NYPD Chief of Department John Schell was initially rejected for NYPD Chief of Patrol by City Hall. So the CRT team was created as a proxy. Jeffrey Madry asked Deputy Commissioner of Operations Kaz Dawdry to create a plan to get John Schell promoted to Chief of Patrol as an avenue for Schell's ultimate promotion. That included creating their, quote, podcast, end quote, and other uses of department resources. So what I'm getting to here is the entire concept of CRT was created for John Schell. Why? John Schell has had an issue in the past. As you know, there was an incident where he unfortunately killed someone. And as I've also posted in the past, there apparently there's no grand jury minutes to this from the Brooklyn DA's office, which was back in 07, 08. And it was a civil trial, and the city had to fork over a couple $1 million in that. It was a wrongful death suit. But yet John Schell never was, nothing ever happened to him. And he just went all the way to the Chief of Patrol. Now he's the Chief of Department. And of course, that couldn't happen unless this little unit was put together. So very recently, there was an article written in Pro Publica, and it was written by a very highly esteemed journalist. His name is Eric Umansky, and I have Eric Umansky with us today to give us all a look into his entire expose on the CRT team, because this was a fascinating read, and I'm sure plenty of people want to hear more about it. So, Eric, welcome to the Sal Greco Show. Thanks for coming on. How are you today?
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Eric, I'm going to tell you, I saw you a couple of days ago. You were on Errol Lewis. It was pretty good. And, I know people may have their own opinions about Errol Lewis. I respect him a lot. I actually like what some of the stuff he puts out. And but it was only 9 minutes you had on. So yeah. There's a lot of questions that people are asking about this article because it was very detailed. I know you did it, it seems that you did a lot of work on this. So can you tell us, how'd you start this? How long this investigation was? Because it almost reads like a chapter in a book. It's so long.
Yeah. So I've been reporting on the NYPD for a few years now. And I actually did a story about 1.5 years ago about the issue of body-worn cameras overall. When I was reporting on that story, a former senior official said to me, there's a unit that's operated off the books, and you should really look into that unit. And I said, oh, well, sure. What's the name of that unit? And she said, well, I don't know the name of the unit, but I know that they are not organized as they should be, and have therefore gone under the radar. And that's quite enticing. So over the next few months, I kept kind of asking around and talking to people. And there was this one unit that was this sort of interesting mix, because on the one hand, they made these, what I call sizzle reels. They made these YouTube videos and Instagram videos set to like pouncing music, like video game music or movie soundtrack, showing the unit in operation. But on the other hand, people were telling me that they had never been given a command code, or hadn't been given a command code for months, and that officers were often assigned to the team were working on the team without actually being formally assigned to it, what's known as telephone transfers. And what that means when all that comes together is it's actually really hard to track the conduct of this unit. And when I started calling around about it, and I just was calling around to some folks I had talked to over the years, somebody said to me, well, you know how close it is to the mayor? And I thought, well, not really. No, I don't really know. And they started sort of laying out how the mayor has repeatedly gone out with the team, how most fundamentally it's the mayor's buddies who run the team. And I just kind of went from there. And honestly, there was a period of time where they would tell me an example of that, and I would think that can't possibly be true. You know, one person would tell you it, and in journalism, in our world, if one person tells you something, it's intriguing, but it's not actually proof enough, right? You need at least two people to tell you something in order to cite it, and then lo and behold, I hear from a second person, and I think like, I'll be damned, or I hear from a third or fourth, I get records, and it just was like, this is really an example. The mayor, as we've seen in all sorts of ways, has run his administration through cronyism, right? Not through who is the best for the job, but who he knows the best. Obviously, it's not every position, but in many positions, it's who he has a relationship with. And what this seems to be is who he has a relationship, and letting them be in charge of this team that in turn would route around the normal chain of command, right? When Keechant Sewell was commissioner about a year and a half ago, she got enormously frustrated because people like Kaz Daughtry, who you referenced, would not listen to Keechant Sewell, not listen to the commissioner, even though the commissioner is their boss, his boss. Instead, he would call up the mayor and say, someone's giving me pushback, and can I tell them that you're on my side? That kind of thing, right? And that doesn't help an organization to be accountable and in good order.
I see. Actually, it is a nice comment from Nighthawk for you. We need more reporters like this to investigate the crimes in NYPD that are internal affairs, choose to hide and evade from accountability. Eric, there seems to be a problem here. What you're saying already, there's a broken link with all this, because you're right. You're supposed to report things. There's the glaring factor here you wrote about, right, is there was legal bureau personnel with them. And I believe the article, you were stating how they were there and they were telling them not to do. And if all of a sudden, if they intervened, which I thought Eric Adams said, if they were there, whatever they say, my office is going to follow. All of a sudden, like you just referenced, Kaz Daughtry is there and he's calling the mayor to intervene in that. How did that even come about?
Yeah, so CRT was a new effort, and by the way, I should say, because you mentioned the creation of CRT. So CRT started as such an ad hoc effort, as such a non-codified, non-formal effort that even people at the NYPD didn't know it existed. It's not quite that it was secret. It's just that just these guys knew, and they didn't tell the other guys and the other women. And so they would just sort of go out on their patrol. And I think as a way of trying to keep things under control, the NYPD the legal bureau said, okay, we're going to send a lawyer or two out with you guys. And I think actually at first Kaz thought it was like, that's cool, we can show how great the work we're doing is. And then the lawyers would say, and this wasn't, you're beating the hell out of somebody. It was, more kind of everyday stuff. You just gave a summons to somebody who there was no reason to do that, right? It was an unnecessary or even illegal summons. Or you trespass on somebody's private property, you don't actually have the power to do that. But, doing things by the book, right? They said, you guys need to do things by the book. And so according to one account I have, this lawyer was there and, raised this red flag. And Kaz said, okay, I'm going to call up the mayor. And calls up the mayor and says, these, pencil, guys are trying to stop me from doing the good work that is your good work, Mr. Mayor. And the mayor says, give me the lawyer's name. And then further says, I want to know if the lawyers are offering the law or their opinion. Right now, that has a chilling effect. And the lawyer said, well, you know, my opinion is my opinion. It is, I'm trying to follow the law. But you know, what ended up happening was that Kaz said, yes, you guys, officers, continue doing what you were doing, right? You know, follow. So it has a real chilling effect. And people, by the way, begin to know which way the wind is blowing, right? You know, if you're in a meeting and you're talking about officers from CRT and, or actually, I'll give you another example, that lawyers and others within the NYPD flagged. I was talking about these promotional videos that they made, right? Well, again, oversight officials within NYPD, such as lawyers, were taken by surprise that these videos even existed. And then they looked at them and said, these things are problematic, right? You guys are doing things here not the right way. And Kaz said, basically, he complained to the mayor and more or less said, I don't have to listen to you. And then there was a negotiation about, well, let's just do this right going forward. We're going to vet it and so forth. And that's fine and that's reasonable. But what Kaz said was, I want to make clear from the get-go, the mayor likes these things and that these are important to the mayor. So now the whole debate is not, should we do them or not? It's, let's make these things because the mayor wants these things and make them in a way that can work for everybody. It's a kind of, you know, you get to put your thumb on the scale. And that's what happened a number of times. Yeah.
And you know, I want to point this out. I think it's glaring is that Eric Adams, who's for and against everything, he always states this numerous times. When a corporation counsel or one of those lawyers advise him on something, he can't go against what they advise. And then he's out there. I believe he's suing the Trump administration for $80 million with the migrant funding or all that money he wanted. In that instance, he's ordering them to do something. So in one instance, he's saying, I have to follow them and follow the law. In the other instance, he's dictating to them because, again, he's the head. He's the mayor. They all work for him. And he's saying, you have to do this. So in this instance, what you're saying is he actually got on the phone and told Kaz Dodry, is this a fact or opinion of the lawyer? He said that. He said he wants to know if it's a fact or an opinion of a lawyer.
I mean, that is our understanding. That is our understanding of it. I will say we went to the mayor. We asked everything here to the mayor, to DCTI, i.e. the NYPD. And what the mayor's office said was exactly actually what you just said, which is that the mayor has always advised essentially underlings, those who work for him, that they should follow the lawyer's advice. And so we reflected that in the story. You know, this is what we've been told. This is what he said.
In fact, someone just referenced here, TC says, Kaz became Judge Dredd. I am the law. I mean, it's starting to sound like this. And for everything, we could go back in time and we, under Ray Kelly and Bill Bratton and that whole era. And trust me, taxpayers are still paying for that whole stop, question, and frisk and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And Eric Adams, who was, I remember when he went to court and he testified against stop, question, and frisk. And now he's basically instituting that policy on steroids. He's actually, he's an overdrive. Because when I hear things like what you just said, whether it's an opinion or a fact, and he's saying this, then he's saying basically, you know what? This is a good thing for what I always say, a perception management campaign. So unless this doesn't work in making him look good, then we don't go for it. But if it does make him look good, we are going to go for it. And look, Ron Layson chimes in. He says, did you expect to hear anything different from the Adams administration? No, you're right. It's really for a guy who touts himself as he follows the law. and you have these guys going around, and trust me, some of the tactics, I don't want to get into that with CRT that was being used are questionable with the way they're heavy-handed. Him saying that is quite alarming. And I don't know if there's any kind of liability or legal liabilities in the future with any lawsuit in regards to his personal involvement. Because you said he was there. So did he go to like these, I guess, what they call roll calls, or was he running around with the team when they're doing things?
So he did there are a few times that we've seen photos of him with the team. One, I think it was actually at 1PP, and it was a picture of them in somewhere in a kind of ceremony room, something like that, not out with the team. And then another time, he was literally out with the team. He actually donned the khaki pants and said, "I'm turning out with the team." I don't know what they did later that night, but he was certainly sort of proud to embrace them, and of course has repeatedly throughout the past 2 years, whatever it may be, pumped up one of the leaders of the team, Kaz Daughtry, right? Who he is particularly close with, and as you noted before, well, of course, went from infamously from a detective to a assistant commissioner, which, as I understand it, you tell me, but it's not really a thing, and then deputy commissioner, and now is all the way in the august realms of a deputy mayor for public safety. And you have, I think, a lot of legitimate questions there. Is that merit-based? Is it, what about his history of misconduct, which is well documented? And by the way, only a fraction of which you actually see in the formal record because of issues like, he's technically a civilian as a deputy commissioner and so forth. I documented a case that it didn't amount to misconduct, but definitely people told me it was really bad judgment, where he went on a high-speed chase of a alleged car thief. In fairness, he probably was a car thief, but an alleged car thief, where they went over I think it was the George Washington Bridge, and went into New Jersey, where Kaz cut him off in an effort to get the guy to crash into him, and which is all just incredibly. I spoke to a guy who's a police best practice expert, a guy named Chuck Wexler, and has done a report on high-speed chases. And he said, look, the general rule is don't do a high-speed chase unless there's already public safety at threat, or the safety of somebody at threat, because it's such a dangerous thing to do. That wasn't the case. This guy wasn't a violent criminal, or hadn't been, and there's no evidence he's a violent criminal. And guy ended up getting badly injured. And by the way, I got the internal it's known as FID report, right? Force Investigation Division report, which documented the incident. And one interesting thing it noted is that this whole time, Kaz didn't have his body-worn camera on. Just left it off. So, yeah.
Rules for thee, but not for me. And any of this, because Marlon Bethel, he actually come up with a good question. Do you know, was Adams present during any of the CRT car pursuits that went sideways and led to injuries?
That I don't know. I do know that Kaz and Shell were present during some. There's a story that briefly mentions it. I mean, those guys were often going on pursuits. And by the way, the natural question is, well, how many pursuits were there, and how often did they end in crashes, particularly for CRT? And the answer is the NYPD doesn't disclose that data, right? They don't break it down by CRT. We do know that car pursuits overall for the NYPD had jumped something like 600% over the last 2 years. And further, that Commissioner Tisch, I think last month, maybe in January, said enough of it and changed so those are the things that we know, but there's a lot that we don't know.
If she changed the procedure, the thing is, it's always, if you read the patrol guard procedure, it's always really how you interpret it. And, you know, it's usually on a supervisor that if things go sideways, the supervisor will fall on the sword. If things go good, everyone just claps and cheers and says, all right, well, okay, that was fine. But I noticed that under John Shelgers, if you remember, when he was running around with these individuals, he had stated that the car chases, we're going to now, you're no longer going to run on us. He came out with that. And then Jeffrey Madry, who was the chief of the department at the time, came out and said, well, you still have to follow the patrol guide. So it's a double whammy, a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I mean,
The other thing that Shell said around the same time was, I'm not going to read it word for word, but he said, the mayor has given us the mandate to go on offense. We're not just going to play defense anymore. We're going on offense, right? And if you're an officer who hears that, you think, well, okay, I'm going to go the extra mile. You know, that's what you guys want is for me to get the guy. You know, I'm not going to stop him in traffic or whatever it may be. So it's a tone setting from the very top.
Yeah, Ron Layson says, what is the conviction rate for those arrested for, let me see what he said, for car theft, GLA? Gonna say about zero. Yeah, you're right. Right here, it says in your article, you wrote, within the department, Adams' views are clear. Our mayor has given us the mandate to start playing offense out here. One of CRT's early, John Shell, told a local TV station in 2023, months after the promotional videos. You know, and just to go back on what you said with this car chase, that went into, so they pursued a car into this is Kaz Dawdry on a car pursuit into another state, which now you lose your jurisdiction, right? And even to do that, because I wasn't involved in this, but someone I work with did it on a night when I was working. So I know how this works. So he went past the bridge. He went from the Bronx into Jersey and apprehended a suspect in Jersey, which would now trigger, I believe, the Port Authority or MTA, who was in charge of the George Washington. They would be in charge of that, technically.
No, they went past the George Washington. They went to another bridge.
That is an incident that is going to have a lot of people demanding answers for questions. They're going to say, why, who even would authorize that? And you're saying Kaz Dawdry did not have his body camera for that, so there's no footage of this at all.
There may be footage from other officers who were in pursuit, but not from Kaz. Yeah.
Who should? I mean, he should have a camera. I mean, he never had his camera on.
Yeah.
He's immune to that.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things we noted is that was very much a pattern with CRT, which is late activation of camera, early turn off of camera, not capturing the meat of events, right? And also, by the way, you were mentioning stop and frisk, not documenting them. So, you have a questionable stop and frisk. Then there's the question of, okay, well, let's see the paperwork. No paperwork. Right. Let's see the body cam footage of it. No body cam footage. That's what you're doing.
So see, now Ron Lay says another question. Was this incident during the time that they had the new body-worn cameras, which being memorialized in department databases?
It's possible. It all kind of happened around the same time. And the new body-worn cameras, which just because I feel like you got a bunch of former PD guys on there, or current ones.
Ron Lay's retired inspector.
So I'm just going to throw the specifics at you, which is that they are Axon 4 body cameras. So if you just Google Axon 4, frankly, when someone told me this, I couldn't really believe it. And so I started Googling around. And in fact, yes, Axon 4 body cameras have this feature that allow for live feeds where you authorize users. I could say, send my live feed to Sal Greco. And what happened was this in the spring of 2023, and basically CAS, as I understand it, did a did a little pilot program. But pilot programs, I think, being a little bit generous to how kind of structured it was. He called up, someone told me, he called up an Axon representative and had them buy a few dozen of these things, and then just, gave them to his boys and replaced the normal cameras. But what that meant was the normal cameras were in the NYPD system. They stored in the main cloud. These things, stored in some thing that CAS or a colleague set up that nobody else knew about.
See, this was interesting. Is actually yesterday we have another show on the network here. It's the Executive Perspective, and Ron Layson and Rob Lukash are on there, and they're both executive. We're actually talking about this whole body camera thing, this whole phenomena of the way they operate and who's allowed to do what. And I want to home in on this because you mentioned this live stream. Now, these body cameras, you're saying that the entire NYPD do they not have the exact same camera, or was this just Kaz Dordry and his group of cops underneath them have this body camera? It's just particular.
Ding, ding, ding. I mean, so now keep in mind, this is nearly 2 years ago. And so I actually think that they may be beginning to use this new camera more. Someone mentioned that to me, but I'm not sure. At the time, yeah, it was just, typically there is think about it. There's 35,000 officers, right? There's a centralized procurement system for purchasing cameras. And yeah, you all have the same camera, an Axon 3, right? There may be, no, you all have the same camera. And then, yeah, Cass just, he didn't speak to me. I asked to speak to him, so he didn't speak to me, so I can't get inside his head. But what people said to me was, Cass conveyed that there's this new feature, and we want this new feature. And so rather than go through the procurement desk, he just called up the Axon rep and said, I want a couple dozen of these cameras. And you think about it, by the way, this is a guess. I don't know how it went down, but the NYPD is what, 2 or 3 times larger than the next largest police department in the country. It's like, it's a customer you want to keep happy, right? So if a senior person from the NYPD calls you and says, we're interested in trying these things out, can we get a first taste free kind of thing, which by the way, I don't know if it's charged what, but they said, yeah, we could make that happen. So they sent along these cameras. And I don't think it was, the sense that I got was not that it was purposefully kept secret. It wasn't a, black ops thing. It was just, Cass kind of wanted to do this thing, and he didn't think through the steps of, well, who else do I need to tell to make sure we are doing this all in a proper way? And so then what ended up happening was NYPD lawyers were looking for footage around a case to share for discovery, to share with the court. They couldn't find it, but they knew about the case. They had actually gone out with the CRT, and they were like, well, I don't understand. We know you guys had cameras. We saw the incident. Where's the footage? And eventually they were told, I think like, oh, well, yeah, we started this other little thing. It's like, where did you guys start? And, and as one of the sort of senior people told me, their heads exploded, right? I mean, because you have a whole system for sharing stuff that abides by the law. So,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
See, right here, Ron Lace is actually, he points it out, and I'm trying to, I think this is the direction of what you're trying to say. The issue is that the Risk Management Bureau, which leads the body-worn camera, was unaware that they had them and could not monitor them under the federal monitorship. I think that's, he's right with that, because in the same article, you do reference the Risk Management Bureau, and they completely shunned, what's his name? Pontillo, right? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Pontillo, a fellow paisan of mine. And with this camera, though, because so they want to, so the live stream went back to civilians, apparently. So is Eric Adams had this live feed, and what, I mean, what were they doing with this camera? They were, and it's apparently it's only a select group. Again, it doesn't, it's not job wide, it's a test.
So I have an incomplete picture. What I know is who was given access, right? I know, it's like when you give a list of permissions for your computer or something like that. You type in a series of email addresses. So I know that the mayor was given access. What I don't know is whether the mayor was sitting at 8 o'clock, eating his celery and clean greens and watching footage. I don't know what he watched or when. I do know, I will tell you, it just adds a little bit, is I spoke to two people from the NYPD who said, well, I don't know about this special body worn cam, but I know that the mayor has done something like this before, where he has gotten access to a special body worn cam. So,
yeah. So, and I'm thinking, so because you said Kaz Dodry called them up. So I want to, do you know if this is on any of the NYPD budget? Who exactly authorized for him to buy these cameras? Or they bought, or is this like a contract that we don't know about? Because how is this,
keep in mind,
Eric, I didn't hear about this. They didn't say, hey, who bought these? Who authorized this? What, how much is this costing taxpayers?
I'll tell you one thing, which is, again, we asked the mayor, we asked the NYPD about all of it. And so, and some of the responses surprised me. One of the responses that surprised me was when I asked about these cameras, they said, yes, Kaz did buy these cameras. And I said, well, did the mayor have access? And she said, well, I don't know, but what would the problem be if he did? Because, he's just a hands-on mayor. I said, I'm fine quoting you to that effect, if that's what you like. So they certainly, didn't deny it. In terms of it wasn't just the fact that sort of obfuscation went beyond the cameras. So you had mentioned Risk Management Bureau and Matt Pontillo, the sort of internal oversight guy, and the federal monitor, right? That's overseen the NYPD for what, 11 or 12 years now, and the monitor started hearing about community response teams and said, well, what is this? What are these things? We don't understand. And so queried the NYPD, and Matt Pontillo went to John Schell and said, so are these like CRT teams? Is this like a real thing? Is it an ongoing thing? And Schell said, oh, no, it's not an ongoing thing. It was like a one-time experiment. And he went back and told the federal monitor, which is a court-appointed entity. I mean, you are talking to a federal court, and gave them a bunch of BS ultimately. It was a real it was a real unit. It was ongoing. And Pontillo, a colleague, eventually pulled him aside and said, you've just been snookered here. It's a real thing. And he was like, And so he had to go back to the monitor and say, I apologize for just giving you incorrect information. You know, and if he hadn't been a stand-up guy, that would have looked like the NYPD lying to a federal court.
Yeah, you know, Matt Pantillo, he's served the NYPD for a long time. He's very well respected. He's a 3-star chief. He knows what he's talking about. I would take his opinion over Kaz Audrey, John Shell, and Madry or Eric Adams any day of the week. That's how good he is. And it kind of sounds like he did what he's supposed to do, and he's raising the alarms. And apparently he got, you know, basically told, you know, you got to go. You got to retire because we don't want you like a shoe fly coming around telling us what's legal and what's not. I'm the boss. Like, that's the kind of vibe I'm getting from what you're saying, because he had all the red flags out there, and they still did whatever the hell they wanted. Yeah.
So he wrote a very critical audit of CRT in the summer of 2023, and he was invited to present it. And it wasn't, you know, I looked at every single unit, I looked at every single officer, it's sort of a case study, but he looked at some trends. For example, they're not turning on their camera. For example, they're not actually assigned to the team. And he raised real alarms. And he, by the way, described it to me as the result of the way that stuff was working is that it was a ghost unit. And so he did that. He was supported by the commissioner at the time, Keechant Sewell. And then Keechant Sewell was tired of being undermined and worked around by the mayor, by the mayor's buddies. And so actually, as it happened, I don't think this is the cause, but as it happened, the same day that Matt Pantillo presented his audit, Keechant Sewell went to a meeting with the mayor and then resigned that day. Her replacement, you know him well, Commissioner Caban.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Commissioner Caban, one of the first things that Commissioner Caban did was present Matt Pantillo with a choice. Be demoted 5 ranks or retire. And Pantillo said, I don't think he really said this, but F y'all. And he decided that he's going to lead a nice, comfortable life upstate. And, so yeah, multiple people I spoke to at the NYPD had tried to raise alarms, tried to push the NYPD in the right direction, and ended up getting pushed out or feeling like they were no longer welcome.
Yeah, so I mean, in Ed Caban's tenure, it was all about partying and corruption, and the good guys at work, like Matt Pantillo, here's the door. We don't need you. We want to keep this in-house. And here's another question from Rob Lukash, who's, again, he's on the executive perspective, and he's a chief. He was a retired chief on the job. So he put, not uncommon to do a pilot program and not tell everyone, but wondering if the cops knew about it and if the union knew about it. Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I don't know whether the union knew about it. The cops in the unit knew about it because they had new body cams, and they're different than the older ones. But I can tell you that multiple people, I can think of 3 or 4 people who should have known about it within the system. So, NYPD lawyers, the sort of technical side of things. In other words, where it exists on a server kind of thing, that kind of thing. The commanders just didn't know about it.
Hey, this is just, and it almost feels, you know, you've watched the show Cops, everyone knows it, and it shows when cops take action, and this is kind of why I believe the New York City Police Department wasn't on that show, or they were like temporarily many moons ago. And this whole pilot program with this live, it seems to me, because I don't know the legalities. I guess the federal monitor would be one, but other than that, this seems like another self-impressed thing, because these guys are big with pounding their chest in public and being on TV. Yeah. I think this was another one of those ploys, because other than explaining why you're going to live stream this thing, and it's just a select group. So basically, CRT, I believe, is broken into 5 boroughs. Yeah. And then it's the citywide team, which is Kaz Dodry's unit and John Schell. And that's the unit you're describing. And they only live streamed to whoever it was that they were live streaming to. And I think this is just, it's like a big self-impressed program where they just want to tout themselves. I really can't put wrap my, other than this also, what does this end up costing taxpayers? Because there's no explanation about this. And they're never going to, I don't know if they're ever going to ask Tish at these committee hearings, because I think this is a big waste of money, especially with the federal monitor.
Yeah, I'm not hearing an argument for me on that one. I mean,
somebody wrote, TC writes, maybe Shell told Dr. Phil about the new cameras. You're right. And, so another thing I want to talk about that article, because you were telling me the feedback of it, was the incident with that officer. Yeah. He twisted the car, or he turned the car into someone, and apparently he got punished or penalized, but he's still in this unit. And apparently there's a lot of the discipline we don't really know about with CRT. So I don't know if you could talk about that.
Yeah, so sure. So one of the main priorities that CRT has long had, and actually the mayor laid this out as a priority back before he was even elected, but he was running for mayor. He was talking about the nuisance of unlicensed motorcyclists and ATV riders. I mean, and I think as New Yorkers, many of us have seen this, they really can be a nuisance. It's a real thing, people riding in groups and stuff. But he made it a priority to go after them, and CRT in turn made it a priority to crack down. And they, can point to numbers showing thousands of motorcyclists who've gotten ticketed or who've had their motorcycle seized and so forth. It is worth, though, keeping in mind these are not felony cases, that these are essentially traffic violations. And it's the sort of level of misconduct you're dealing with. So there's a guy named Sammy Williams in the actually Memorial Day weekend, 2023, lives in the Bronx, lives with his very cute 6-year-old daughter. He is a big aficionado of motorcycling. You don't get the sense in any particularly dangerous way. He just kind of goes out and cruises. And he decides to go for a ride, kisses his daughter goodbye, rides down into Manhattan without incident, and then is riding back up to come home. And they're over a small bridge, I believe called the University City Bridge, maybe, and from Manhattan to the Bronx. And he's going in one direction, and you see these CRT officers who are going in another direction. And they spot Sammy, and what the officer does at the very last minute is swing his car. There's a video of it in the article, actually. It's like embedded if you scroll up or down. The police officer at the very last second jacks his car, swings his car right in front of Sammy Williams. And Sammy Williams has nothing to do, has no opportunity to stop, slams into the car, and then actually it's such a dramatic incident that he goes flying. You want to let this show for a second? It's a short video, and yeah.
So okay, I can see it. Oh, I see that.
You see him flying. You see that glass that goes across.
That's the other team, right? Or is it him?
No, that's the team that pulls it over. I think he gets on the car hood to protect himself. He's worried that people were driving on the road, maybe.
That's. Was there a supervisor? I mean, who was on the scene with this? Is it just? I mean, you know,
they wouldn't give any information. You know, it remains under investigation. It hadn't even been described as a crash by the CRT. I just was watching videos of you know, chases that ended up in crashes, and I was like, those guys have khaki pants. It's harder to see there, but when you see them afterwards, they have khaki pants. And what they do is they end up arresting him, you know, holding him against,
it's like a wheel turn. He's doing. I mean, I don't think they trained. They trained the cops in the academy to make the driver's academy.
You tell me this, right? As a trained cop, in what world do you swing in front of a person on a two-wheel, you know, thing, right, where they're gonna crash? I mean, you are gonna mess them up.
But you know what's gonna happen is when you're asked, they're gonna ask you, officer, was this in any of your training? The answer is gonna be no. But again, we don't know. Like, I don't know if a supervisor authorized this or was on the radio saying, because again, what you're describing is it's like almost like, you know, Eric Dim coined it. He calls it like Eric Adams' secret police, and it's kind of what you're describing is these guys kind of just do whatever they want and they get away with things. Now, there was an incident that wasn't in the article, but it was very public. We covered it on the Finest Unfiltered, me, John, and Eric, and it was the incident of Lieutenant Stephanopoulos.
I did cover this. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember that? He grabbed him out of the vehicle and decides to, when he's on the ground and the guy's at that point, he's getting handcuffed. He's no longer a threat. He decides to stomp on his head. Now, this individual, Lieutenant Stephanopoulos, was modified temporarily. All right. But he was allowed, apparently, allegedly, from what I understand, and he was allowed to accrue overtime while being modified. Then he's not only not modified anymore, he's full duty, and he was transferred to I believe, the Staten Island CRT team. So he's actually, nothing ever happened out of that, even though that is something that was heinous, and definitely no one has trained any officer to do that. And really, the guy was in the hospital, and he's lucky that he doesn't have any brain damage. I don't know if you can talk about that incident. I know that was like
I did look into that incident. Yeah, I did look into that incident. It's this incident of a guy named Brian McCary who was driving down FDR, and exactly why he was being chased. You know, he has one story basically saying unmarked cars were coming after me. I don't know what the hell was happening. And, you know, the police said he had drugs, I believe. And, you know, I have no idea which version of that is correct, but he eventually crashes in Lower Manhattan. And Stephanopoulos is kind of, and I've seen this before, worked up and pissed off that, you know, this guy's been reckless or whatever. So he opens the door of this guy's car and smacks him in the head. Now, you have, because I looked closely at it previously, it seemed to you like he was pistol whipping.
Yes.
Right? And we didn't actually say because we you know, aren't experts and weren't sure, but you know, we wondered that too. And then he kicks him in the head such that observers were like, "Yo, he's having convulsions now." And yeah, he ended up in the hospital. There are pictures of him. And Stephanopoulos, is that his last name?
Stephanopoulos,
yeah.
Stephanopoulos.
Had I think it's 18 substantiations, maybe 12. Has a enormously lengthy record of misconduct, and is a lieutenant, by the way. Is higher ranking. There was another guy who a case that we wrote about and showed that actually this audit that Pontillo did focused on this one case where, there's the guy. Pontillo focused on this one case where officers needlessly stop a guy, right? He's not doing anything, he's walking. And when he complains and says, "Why are you stopping me? Why are you stopping me?" and gets kind of worked up, about it. The lieutenant in the crew finally gets pissed off and comes out of his car and grabs him and throws him against a car window, such that you could hear it. You could hear it crunching. And that officer is a guy named who's a lieutenant in CRT named Gabriel Cuevas. And the reason I'm flagging Gabriel Cuevas' name is that he has among the most complaints and the most confirmed complaints, substantiated complaints of anybody in the NYPD. 28 substantiated complaints. There you go. Yep. Right. And so you got to ask yourself, if that's the guy's record, is he really the best person to be in charge of a team that's tip of the spear? No.
This is the MO of John Shell. And somebody asked in here previously, 5-0 asked, what charges Bragg or the Bronx District Attorney charge in any of these situations that you know of? Were there any charges for?
You gotta wait for my next story for that one, but no, but it's not quite a follow-up. It's just looking at the question of DAs. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody. DAs very rarely charge misconduct. Yeah, there are a few cases after the Black Lives Matter protest, but generally speaking, it's not something that DAs often take on.
Look at that. It actually changes saying, he ended his service July 2023. That is, and a lot of this it should fall back on Kaz Daughtry and John Shell, because remember, they're the ones that were egging all these officers on this unit. I think what you wrote is in detail. It's very damning, and it shows a lot of holes with CRT, and especially the Kaz Daughtry's of the world and John Shell. But I know today, I think they are trying to revamp this now into a Q team or whatever. They're trying to. I guess
you hear that from Tish?
Yes, she keeps saying Q. Basically, it's kind of like the old. When I started on the NYPD was called impact zones. They're having Q zones. All she's doing is window dressing the Bill Bratton and Ray Kelly era, that stuff. Which again, that had its own issues at that time, which New York City taxpayers are still paying for it with a federal model and all this other stuff. So I don't know why we're going to go back in time to things that may or may not work in 2025 instead of trying to create something new, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. But I think this is what you're saying with CRT and what you found. It is troubling. And people shouldn't say, we're in a new era and just forget about it, when people need to be held accountable, especially this and this stuff. This is pretty, damning what you're saying. All this stuff. Another thing too is the discipline. Were you ever able to find the discipline records of the CRT team, or did you find anything there? Because Caban kind of let everybody who's associated to people he knows get away with whatever they want. And you hurt the average cop that doesn't know anyone and has the smallest offense of discipline.
So the best thing that we could find was we looked at the record of previous confirmed misconduct for a member of the CRT team, which is a little bit over half of members of CRT teams have had at least one confirmed misconduct case, which doesn't seem like all that much, but then you compare it actually to the average of an NYPD officer, and for them it's just 15%. It's a big difference, you know? So yeah, they have much lengthier records of misconduct. I have a request. I'd love to hear from any listeners or viewers who have, you know, suggestions of something I should look into. Is, you know, however is best to share my information. I'm happy to do so.
I'm going to tell you, I was going to wait for it till the end, but I actually think you do have one thing to look into. So as you know, Kaz Dodry now is the deputy mayor. As a deputy mayor, we already learned that he had to have a special waiver because he lives in Suffolk County, but he works in New York City in the administration. So everyone who works in this administration, you can look back. There were three I could tell you off the bat: Anthony Miranda, Timmy Pearson, Phil Banks, all ex-NYPD officers with a pension. Now, in order to work for the city government, once you already have a pension, you have to file a 211. It's a 211 waiver. I could almost guarantee you right now, I'm pretty sure that Kaz Dodry has not filed this.
Yeah, okay.
Whether Kaz Dodry now is in this, whether he is still somehow keeping his pension right now and he's secretly working as an NYPD employee, or he had to stop that because now he's starting his civil service in the now he's starting as a city official. That's another pension, but he has to fill that 211 waiver. But remember, Eric, the guy in charge of DCAS, who's in charge of all of this, is Luis Molina, another.
Oh yeah, I know Luis.
Administration. It's just it doesn't stop. But that is something that you should definitely look into, the 211 waiver. And here it is. It says this was another article. I believe Chris Sommerfeld wrote it. Deputy Mayor Kaz Dodry granted waiver to live on Long Island despite New York City residency requirement. It's awesome. I don't know. It's okay. You know, it's more and more with these people. Oh, Nighthawk said they have a CRT officer accused of rape of another MOS who's still active.
Can I get in touch with Nighthawk officer? Seriously.
Yeah, I do that. Yeah, if you so what? How can
follow
people
up with you?
Yeah, if anything, or how can people reach out to you?
People can reach me. I can just tell people my phone number. Frankly, you can reach me on Signal, which is that's because I moved on to Blues. My information on it. 917-687-8406. It's 917-687-8406. Or I'll just give you my personal Gmail because it's easiest to spell. It's Umansky, my last name, UMANSKY @gmail.com.
Yeah, listen.
Thank you.
I like your work, and when you do it, it takes a long time, but it's very thorough. I think it's been there's a lot of information you put out here. I suggest people go back and actually go to Pro Publica and pull up this article because it's, you know, we went over it, and Eric described in great detail the facts that he found out. I got a few questions I want to know about, especially that body camera thing, and of course. This office never answers anyone's questions. It seems to be, it seems to be the mantra of the Eric Adams regime, where he likes to call people Negroes and shorties and thinks he's going to get reelected. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, thank you. This has been really great. I've loved it. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, Eric, thank you for coming on. Thank you all for tuning in today to the Sal Greco Show. This has been very informative. I hope there's going to be a follow-up to this because I'm sure Eric is going to get to work on it. And again, if anybody can call, you could call up Eric or email him with any tips, any questions you have, anything you might know, so he could follow up on it and dive into the single most corrupt administration in the history of New York City, the Eric Adams administration. Folks, tomorrow, tune in, 8:05 a.m. for the Finest Unfiltered, the roundtable we have. It should be me, John McCarty, Marlon Bethel. Hopefully Eric Dim will be on as well, and we'll give you the weekly roundup. Also, if you can, go back to the video section of Finest Unfiltered YouTube. You can watch the Executive Perspective from yesterday. That's on 17:05 every Wednesday with Rob Lukash, Ron Layson, and they actually covered the body cameras in regards to a little bit of what we were discussing today. And, of course, 8:05, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, Finest Unfiltered podcast, and myself, Sal Greco Show on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12:05 live. That's a wrap from here. I hope everybody has a great weekend. I'll see you next week on the Sal Greco Show. But again, tomorrow, 8:05 in the morning, watch the Finest Unfiltered, me, Marlon, John, and hopefully Eric Dim. And if anyone hasn't, squad-life.com to support Eric Dim and his son. He's still going through, Derek is still there. He's pushing. We're doing what we can to fight this disease. You could buy a shirt there, or you could also go to the GoFundMe page where you'll find Eric. There's only one fundraiser on GoFundMe. That's for Eric and his family. So please go on there if you feel inclined to support. If not, just keep Eric in your thoughts and your prayers. And with that, I wish everybody, I very want to do, and you have a safe and happy rest of your day.
So this is a biblical moment. When Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes were asking me to step down. God, forgive them. Are you stupid?